to reports. Idris, who's currently on indefinite leave from the game, was said to be on a Kentucky tour in Ho Chi Minh City, where he became separated from his group and encountered a group of violent kidnappers who attacked him and tried to extort money from him. The 6'5" centre escaped and, distressed, immediately contacted his family, who informed federal authorities. Idris's mother Alana contacted Kentucky on Facebook, fearing for the safety of her son. "It's a matter of life and death. Can't stress the importance of this message," she wrote. The travel organisation later told Alana that it had located Idris and confirmed his safety. Now, there is a bit more to this story from things I've been reading online that basically say that Jamal Idris was able to extricate himself from the clutches of about 6 kidnappers. So
what we're saying is he's still got it, and if someone wants to sign him, he's still you know, he's got a fighting fit.
He's got a bit of the Mitch Garbutt's about him. He's yeah, absolutely. It's up there for me with the story about Duncan Ferguson being burgled and calling the police, having knocked out one of the burglars and being stood on the other's throat. The only time I've ever felt sorry for a burglar. Okay, so that's the news from around the world of rugby league. Let's take a look back now at the World Club Series. So, World Club Series, Mark. Safe to say, not necessarily Super League's proudest moment in terms of the way it represented itself, because it was a 3-0 series defeat, and there were some pretty big scorelines as well, weren't there? Starting with Friday night, with the match between St Helens and the Sydney Roosters, which finished 38 points to 12 in favour of the boys from Bondi. Yeah,
it's not like last year's 3-0 defeat where there was a couple of close games, a lot of promise from those. Instead, what we've got is, well, we can cut and paste the reviews almost.
Pretty much. It was a similar story, wasn't it? Sort of, I think in a lot of the games, and I'm struggling to sound like, I don't want to sound like I'm just looking for positives out of this, because I think there's you know, it doesn't look great, but mistakes were punished 100% of the time, and there was some bounces of the ball that went in people's favour, but you've got to legislate for that and know that these Aussie sides will punish you if you're not 100% on your game, and you can't take anything away from them. They all deserve to win.
I'm sure the messages from the listeners and stuff will represent this, but it was a case of almost flawless execution and making your own luck, really, and taking advantage of the opportunities you're creating for yourself. Now, in this particular game, I suppose, well, we'll talk about the players that played well for both sides.
Okay. Well,
do you want to pick anyone out to say?
Well, Dominic Perry was the sponsors man of the match, and he bagged the 2 tries.
Obviously, Adam Swift ran himself absolutely out of gas completely.
The big thing for me from this game, and I'm not picking out
credit for him.
Yeah, I'm not picking out good players really, but the Saints. The thing that was key for me was that the Saints were at times absolutely dominated in the forwards as well. Even with backs running at them at times, you were seeing guys like Savelio get knocked over. You were seeing even Kyle Amor look to be cushioning his run at times, which isn't something you often see from him. Walmsley was less effective than you would normally expect as well, and this was against a depleted Roosters pack as well. There was no Warrior Hargreaves, there was no Boyd Cordner. So again, you would expect that there might be some room for manoeuvre in there. Jaden Nikarima did reasonably well, but he wasn't ever put under any tremendous pressure, I didn't think. Who's the big rangy ginger-haired lad?
Dylan Napper.
Dylan Napper had a good game, I thought, and obviously
Kane Evans.
Kane Evans looks a beast, doesn't he?
Yeah, the starting prop forwards for the Roosters, although they let the opening kickoff go through them, after that they were really on top. Saints were in the battle in the first 15 minutes or so, weren't they? But you felt like it was more through an attritional play, the kind of play they were getting away with in the run up to that grand final victory a couple of seasons ago. Yeah. Whereas against this sort of opposition on this sort of night, they weren't going to be able to pull that off. Yeah,
they were getting early kicks away, weren't they? And finding touch, and it seemed like it was. Yeah. It was putting Sydney back in their own half, but they could strike from you just felt that they could strike from anyone on the field, couldn't
It felt like they were making yards whenever they needed to anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas Saints were struggling and then kicking it on the third or the fourth, kicking it dead, resetting themselves and then just conceding a load of yards again. And if that finally told, didn't it, when young Latrell Mitchell, we spoke about him after the nines, blooming heck, here comes the hop stepper.
Yeah.
I mean, they've certainly found a replacement footwork-wise for RTS. For RTS. He brushed off, even though the kid's 18 and looks small. I'm sure he'll weigh about 14 stone and have a lot more strength than we could ever possibly dream of. But the way he ran through to set up that first try, got the play of the ball, and then Kane Evans just absolutely monstered the Saints forward pack. I think when he scored, he went through Savelio, Walmsley and McCarthy Scarborough, which is your middle unit, and he went through to score, and it basically that set the tone then for the next 20 minutes or so, didn't it? And what we really saw was St Helens making mistakes, forcing plays, and whenever they did that, it was totally taken advantage of. And whenever they didn't do that, they were getting busted through anyway.
And they didn't seem to have any real spark in attack when they did get down to the Sydney Roosters, in the Sydney Roosters 20 metres, say, and they did it a few times. They failed to convert that positional play into actual points as well, and that cost them too.
And then the second half started, and I do think Saints were a little bit better in the pack. Instead of that sort of stuttering into contact, they were actually making contact, making collisions and winning a few collisions. Kyle Amor, I thought, started the second half really well, but it seemed like that start took the energy out of him, and he was culpable for one of the string of really bad defensive plays in the middle of the field. Now, they showed a good ability to defend their own line, I thought, Saints, for the most part. And apart
from like 3 repeat sets at one point on their own line.
Apart from a couple of unlucky bounces, like the second try off Wilkin and things like that. But in the middle of the field, the defensive line was jumping out all over the show. Players were giving far too much space to quicker, younger players, or were jumping out of the line on skillful players, letting offloads go away. There was 2 or 3 of the tries for the Roosters were basically from poor defensive line management, and then as a result, players were broken into collision and were able to offload the ball quite freely. And although there was question marks over a number of forward passes in the game on some of the scores, I think at the end of the day,
they scored sufficiently legitimate number of tries.
It was always going to be the way it was going to be, and
so finished
off to the Roosters. Atelier Vea, I think, had a decent second half for St Helens.
He started going
quite well, but defensively, he was another one of the players who maybe weren't always there in the first half. Certainly in the physicality stakes, you didn't feel like they put themselves about that forward pack, did you? That was a shame.
And I was expecting guys like Walmsley to really be up for that battle and want to show themselves to be every bit the international calibre forward, and it just didn't quite materialise, did it? But, as you might expect for 3 televised games over the weekend with such high profiles, we've had quite a lot of feedback. Starting with Alan Walker, who got in touch and said it was a good practice match. I enjoyed it, but this format won't continue if the NRL always wins with no match form. Some idiots talk of expansion. Only valid match is the Super League Grand Final winner against the NRL Grand Final winner 1 or 2 weeks after the Grand Final. This was an idea that Brian McDermott put forward as well through the week. If other teams play, then the win must put 2 points on the league ladder, and points different affect the ladder too in this format. # no minutes matter.
I like having it at the start of the season rather than having it at the end of the season. I don't want to interrupt the international calendar with it, and also it's a way of bridging between the 2 seasons, I think, and it's really a positive way. You get a little bit of player changeover, but to be honest, with some of those lead players capable of another proper match last year. I mean, I know some of them turned up for that game against New Zealand. That was vaguely entertaining for half an hour. But come on.
I agree. Shory Mungo, Alan Cale got in touch. He said Nicarima even harder to stop than he was to pronounce. Saints looked all at sea for most of the game. We clearly do need one set of rules, but not knowing what rules you're playing to is down to poor coaching. That's right, because there are no free plays.
And Luke Walsh thought there was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not great for a man of Luke Walsh's repute. Sam K. Rowlett, she got in touch as well. Kieran Cunningham watched a completely different game to me, spouted absolute rhubarb in the post-match interview. On the other hand, John Wells and Trent Robinson's analysis was fascinating after the game. Yeah, that's proving to be a bit of a highlight for me at the end of the games when they get the players and the coaches in.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
It's really
I didn't actually catch any of it from this week's games because I've not had time. But
I haven't seen this one. I saw. I've watched the one from Leeds with JT on it and John Wells. That was good.
It was Darius Boyd, was it, after the Wigan?
Yes, it was. I'm not seeing Darius Boyd. Okay, Tim G Radio got in.
Just on the Kieran Cunningham point. Yeah, they would have beaten any other side.
It's bullshit.
I don't understand how he thinks with some of the mistakes and loose play that they had.
I think he's just backing his team and trying to say something positive and not
because they've had a bad start to the season as well.
Not dig him out in the media. If he's going in, the bigger risk for me, if he's going into private meetings with the squad and saying this to them, that's the bigger risk. If he's not digging them out in private, then there's something really wrong. I don't necessarily have a problem with him sort of protecting his players a touch, but he needs to be saying the opposite of it in training this week, because they didn't look like they could beat any other team on any other day. They looked woeful at times. Weak in the forwards, lacking execution and cohesion in the halves. Just
don't get me wrong, they started the game decent and they did score a couple of tries. The second try when they had a man advantage, didn't they? That was a well worked try and a good finish by Perry. The first try was pure. I mean, we'll talk about bounce of the balls. That was a bounce of the ball.
It was.
Ferguson couldn't keep hold of it, and there it went.
And there it goes. Right, Tim G Radio got in touch. He said, if anybody sees Saints, remind them that the season started 3 weeks ago. #snooze. Diane LBW. Now, she's a Saints fan. I'm sure she's got a lot to say. She says, well, that was as embarrassing as last year. The first half was. Anyway, I stopped watching at that point. Not only is Curry...
Yeah, I'll bet that.
Do you know what? Your Sky subscription, Diane, if you're only watching half Saints games, then, you're not getting your money's worth. Well, maybe you are. I don't know. Not only is Cunningham a poor coach, but he's deluded as well, judging by his post-match comments. I think the only reason Saints get involved in these games is to make money from fans and cozy up to the Aussies. They certainly don't look like they actually want to put in what it takes to win one of the bloody games anyway. On top of that, it looks like we've lost Walmsley to injury, which is a bugger, as he's one of our best players and we need him.
Did you catch any of that, Walmsley?
I didn't see Walmsley injured, and I'm not seeing anything online.
No.
I'm not out.
I'm not seeing anything headline worthy anyway.
Exactly,
about it. So hopefully he's alright, and hopefully he starts playing like the player from last year, because he's probably only played 10 minutes of that so far this season, it feels like to me.
I would say so too. Okay.
And I love watching him play when he plays properly.
It's phenomenal. This is what's frustrating, that he's a dominant player. He was as big as any of the forwards that were out there for Sydney.
And Napa and Evans are young forwards. They had an opportunity to get on top of those guys.
Yeah, he could have.
Evans was outstanding.
Yeah, Kane Evans is an absolute freak. Michael Soane got in touch. Didn't see the game, but given that a poor UK side were beaten by a strong New South Wales side, why is Twitter all doom and gloom? Well, I don't think it's. What do you think of that?
I think it's an interesting point. It sort of exemplifies the golfing things. You'd think, with going back to linking it into Alan's one as well, you'd think starting the season already we'd have the form, but we actually had three teams who, the only one who was in winning form was probably the team that was playing the worst in attack but was defending far better. That went out the fucking window.
Second, yeah, true.
But
we've done our bit now.
But yeah, so that's. It was probably sensitive. It's reasonable for that result to have happened in terms of, you think, the way the teams have been playing, even though the Roosters haven't had much prep at all.
Right, let's call it the Roosters.
They've had exciting.
They've lost some key men, and they had a very young, inexperienced halfback combination.
Which Saints put no pressure on, though.
Yeah,
it's like, exactly. Here you go, show your talent, boys, because we're not going to try and stop you. Yeah. That was the shame of it.
It did. Do you want to take it from here?
Cutthroat Jake said, Saints were put to the sword by the better team. They improved in the second half, but were still woeful. Get well soon to Jake. He's had a bit of a sickness bug over the weekend, bless him.
Does Dom Hodgson get in touch at any point in the rundown, do you know? I'm sure he will do, won't he?
I think so, yeah.
Cool, okay. We'll get to him in a minute.
Chris Macy said, spanked Saints for even the tiniest of errors. That was the difference. Support play from the Roosters was top draw, clinical. Mr. Jeff Jefferson said, poor atmosphere and another poor Saints showing against NRL opposition. Super League always looks second rate to NRL.
Fair enough.
Paul Ludo Lewis said, well, that was shite, wasn't it? Jack Owens once again proving Dennis Cookie monster best. Right, with another poor showing, including the kicking out on the full twice.
Yeah, that's...
That bit, the bit that annoyed me most was Ashley Peacock at the end. saying that they didn't know a lot about Saints, showing how little interest in Super League there is to the NRL.
I think it depends who you ask. I think, well,
yeah, you get a bit of
you get a bit of gamesmanship, don't you?
Well, also,
based on this,
you get some people who genuinely don't pay an interest in it, but then you get other people who follow